Shabbat Shalom, everyone. Since its invention, words have been under the microscope, especially through the lens of Judaism. Not the fact that we have words. Words are tools. They are utensils. But how we use those utensils and tools and how we apply them in life have been under severe reflection, introspection, and requirement in Jewish law. Maimonides, the great codifier in the 10th century, put words into 5 different categories. Words and speech. The first is Torah, which is required. When we share Torah and teaching and lessons and values with each other, that is considered required speech. Then he says there is forbidden speech, like lies, things that are untruth, falsehoods. Then there is repulsive speech, like idle chatter, gossip, things that might be true or untrue but are unflattering towards others. Then there is desirable speech, that where we praise another. And then there is permitted speech, what Maimonides calls food and drink. And what he means by that is the permitted speech of, may I please order X, or may I please do Y, or thank you for your service. These are currency in which we exchange back and forth. What's most interesting is that Maimonides still falls on his maxim that used to hang proudly in my office and it hung in my college dorm, a teaching that he held by and encouraged others to follow, which was, Siag l'chachma shtika, that the real gateway to wisdom is through silence, and that we should be silent when we're not sure which speech to use. Judaism has long focused on this notion of speech. And we have struggled not only with focusing on it, but with the sins of it. On the high holidays, Yom Kippur in particular, when we beat our chest for the Al-Chet prayer, I don't know if you're consciously aware, but 2/3 of the prayers that we commit and ask for forgiveness for are sins of speech, not necessarily sins of behavior. And rabbis and psychologists and marital counselors and bosses and friends will tell you that sometimes the most severe pain that another has felt is not through a blow to the gut or to the face, but rather a laser that pierces through our heart with words. Words have been on my mind a lot. In this parashah, words are important. Moses says 3 words that define our existence, define his leadership, and are the greatest call to action in the history of Judaism. Shlach et ami, let my people go. He musters the courage, the wherewithal, the strength, and the laser focus for not a large diatribe, not a sermon on the mount, but 3 words to Pharaoh, let my people go. And what adds to the interest of this is that we learn in this very same portion that Moses is Arel Sfatayim. Technically, that translates to uncircumcised lips, but what it means in the vernacular is that he's not a good orator. He doesn't speak well. It doesn't come naturally to him. Yet still, he stays laser-focused on 3 words, Shlach et ami, let my people go. Since the terrible events of October the 7th and beyond, the way that people have used words against the state of Israel, against Jewish kids on campus, against Jewish people in the diaspora, against Jews in the world, and the way that people have used words supporting kids on campus, supporting Jews in the world, defending Israel and its right to exist, have mattered. But what I remind myself and everyone else daily that too often we forget is that words are currency. It is how we engage and trade one with the other. And it's with that currency that our words are valued. You and I all know people who use their words meaninglessly or flippantly or meanly, and that currency is devalued. And you and I also know people who have economy of words, who use their words more sparingly or more thoughtfully, and the value on that currency rises. But we all know, regardless of its value, that the currency of words matter. I was incredibly pained, hurt, bothered, angered, and upset when one leader in American society used a phrase and words this week as a form of engagement. And because of this person's role in society, it inherently had a higher rate of value in that currency. But in doing so, it devalued the reality of a plight that the Jewish people have been facing forever, and in particular for almost 100 days. I am referring to an interview where Donald Trump referred to those convicted, tried first, but then convicted and imprisoned for their behaviors on January 6th in a court of law in America. And Mr. Trump referred to them not as prisoners, not as felons, but as hostages. They are hostages, he said. He called them the J6 hostages, and he called on the current president to release them. And then others parroted them. And one such congressperson, who made it incredibly challenging for us, which I'll explain in a minute, used the exact same phraseology on Meet the Press 24 hours later, where she referred to these people convicted of a crime in a court of law by juries of their peers as hostages, not prisoners. So when you trade in that currency and you use language that refers to people convicted of a crime as hostages, what it did in that moment is it might have brought people who are part of that camp and valued who they are up here. But it took 139 souls that are being held, abducted against their will, in tunnels, without being able to see by the Red Cross, without knowing who they are, where they are, what medicine they need, what we can provide. You just devalued who they are and what they're about. You equated them to prisoners who have been found guilty of a crime. And they're not equal. And whether we like it or we don't, this is not just some random person walking down the street sharing these words. This is the de facto leader of a major party in America. My words today are not an attack on the Republican Party. My words today are a focused disgust on the person who shared those words. Words matter. And context matters. And the way that we manipulate or curate words can be used as a weapon or a tool. No different than a hammer. I could take a hammer and a nail and build a house for someone who needs shelter. Or I can take that same hammer and hit someone over the head. Now, I can do that to hurt them or do that to defend myself. All of that matters. What we saw this week also, in addition to the devaluing of the word hostage, abductee, are those who curated and raped and manipulated words and realities at The Hague against Israel. They did so with untruths, with falsehoods, with things that weren't even real, or cherry-picked items without any sense of context. There is no other word for it in my lexicon but the word ridiculous. I don't know how The Hague works. I just haven't studied it. I don't know its details. I'm not a scholar of law. I know how the Supreme Court works. I know that they have the right to accept or reject cases. I don't know how it works at The Hague. But I will tell you the fact that The Hague even bothered to hear this ridiculous case and give it a forum where one country, South Africa, had the gall, the audacity to claim this one-sided approach with their words, twisting and manipulating and creating lies, was a gross injustice, and I would argue a crime against humanity. And then I saw people gifted with the same words, who increased the value of our people in the way that they defended our homeland, its right to exist, and our right to defend ourselves. They didn't do so with an M16 or Merkava tank or a missile or an Iron Dome. They did so with words, with truths, and with facts. Someone asked me a question that's one of my favorite interview questions for people. Interview questions, if someone's thinking about coming into rabbinical school, they're joining a company, they're coming to our congregation. My favorite interview question is, what keeps you up at night? What worries you so much that you can't fall asleep? And if you were to ask me that question, the answer is living in a post-truth world. Living in a world where people can traffic in words and untruths and falsehoods and make-believes and claim that it's night right now, that it's Tuesday right now, and that we give it a legitimacy because it was shared. And we give it a legitimacy by saying, I'm entitled to say what I want. It's true that sometimes the world gets messy because the very people who have advocated for pluralism and the very groups that have advocated for freedom of speech have been stymied when those people say freedom of speech and pluralism, then say 2 + 2 = 6, because it doesn't. 2 + 2 always equals 4. And we can't say it equals 6 in the name of pluralism. And we can't say it equals 6 in the name of freedom of speech. We must say, nope, 2 + 2 is 4. But I still celebrate your right to share what you want, and I still believe in pluralism. That's a little bit more complicated. That's a little bit more messy. But ladies and gentlemen, when the world gets messy and muddy and dark, it's time for us to roll up our sleeves and to sharpen our pencils and to be able to push back in ways that are fierce, focused, and honest. To use our words in the way that Maimonides framed, the way that Moses demonstrated, succinctly and to the point, that shares truth and honesty. And we can put those in different categories than opinions. I welcome an opinion and a debate with anybody about who they believe is the best next president for America and why. That's a welcome debate. What isn't open for debate is whether convicted felons should be called hostages in prison, and what that does to devalue real hostages at this time in particular in Gaza. I welcome people who disagree with the strategy of the state of Israel in its efforts of war. I welcome that disagreement. But welcoming that disagreement does not mean that you are entitled to rewrite the history, does not mean that you are entitled to obfuscate facts, does not mean that you are allowed to put a blindfold on to the things that you don't want to look at, focus, or remember. Because that fits into the category that Maimonides framed for us 1,000 years ago, that is core to who we are, about being truthful and honest and focused. The irony for me, and perhaps the pinch point, is that so many people, in the face of words that call prisoners hostages, decide to just stay silent. Not because they don't know it's wrong, but because they don't want to engage in debate, because they don't want to turn away a friend, because they don't want to roll up their sleeves, because it's just messy. And who wants to get so damn messy? It's already messy enough in the world. There's a part of me that empathizes with that. But when I'm done with that level of empathy, I would lovingly put my arm over your shoulder and say, you've got to push back. When someone claims something that isn't true, or that is a false equivalence, or that is broken or dishonest, we have a moral responsibility to speak out about it. Even our leaders who weren't good speakers found the succinct sentence, "Shlach et ami," let my people go, that expressed all of our hopes and aspirations in 3 simple words. We have a role today and tomorrow. And if anything has become obvious to our community since October the 7th, it's that passivity will not work for us if we want to have a future. We can no longer sit on the sidelines and leave it to others. Whether it's in the papers, in the social networks, on television, or at the water cooler, we must use our words, just like Maimonides said, in focused, honest, direct, fair, and fierce defense of values, morals, and our tradition. And those can live in a separate category than opinion and welcome debate. It's not too hard for us to decipher and decode the two. And if we sit silently and do nothing for fear of its messiness and muddiness, well then Maimonides and the Torah told us that that silence is equal to assent. It means we condone it. It means we allow it. And friends, that might even be more dangerous than the lie itself. As we are inspired by a man who wasn't a great speaker, but stood up and focused his fierce words in 3 simple, succinct, organized statement of Shlach et ami, let us find the wherewithal to say, in the face of congresspeople or those who hope to be president, or anyone else who refers to convicted felons as hostages, they are not hostages. They are prisoners. Hostages and abductees are what is in Gaza, and you do a crime by equating them. That's our job. Not to roll our eyes, not to ignore it, but to push back. Because if our silence in the wake of these untruths continues, then the untruths continue, and they rise to the surface as a fact that is based on falsehood. That won't only keep me up at night, it'll keep you up at night, and it will destroy our very foundation for our future. May we find our moral courage. May we find our voice, and may we use those tools, that currency of our words, to shape our world for what it could be, what it should be, and what we want to give our children to inherit. Shabbat shalom, everyone.